And welcome to Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. I'm Steve Swatt with the Sacramento Report. In the next few minutes, we're going to talk about getting tougher on certain sexual offenses. My guest this segment is Brian Maienschein, who's a member of the State Assembly from San Diego. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Steve.
I know you've authored a couple of bills we want to talk about in the next few minutes. One, I guess there's a loophole when it comes to sexual offenses against disabled people.
Yeah, it really was shocking when I learned of this, and there was several cases, but one in particular where a young girl had been raped by her stepfather, and she had severe developmental disabilities. And what we learned was people with developmental disabilities were in essence being treated differently than other girls and women who were raped. And let's face it, rape is rape, no matter who the victim is. Right. And now what we're calling for is more equitable sentencing for those who rape those with disabilities compared to those without.
And did this have to do with the fact that many of these victims just could not communicate in court, for example, and tell their story? And
that's really the tragedy of it, because these victims were being called upon to prove that they didn't consent. And that's not how it should be. Again, rape is rape no matter what. And to requires anybody, let alone somebody with severe developmental disabilities, to testify in court as to how they resisted. Some of them are just physically or mentally incapable of doing so. And so now we want to see more equitable sentencing, and by the way, more severe sentencing for those who take advantage of our most vulnerable.
Does your bill, besides increasing penalties, does it change the burden of proof?
Well, what it does is the burden of proof will stay the same, but what it will do is it will increase the penalties for as both a sentencing enhancement, and it also makes it eligible to be a one-strike crime. And again, I think that's something that if everybody doesn't agree on that, I think pretty close to everybody agrees that this is something that should happen.
Okay, so let's talk about another one of your bills, which has to do with youth sports organizations, Little League, you name it. And I know last year you had a legislation that was successful that gave these organizations tools to do background checks for the volunteer coaches or whatever, right? Well, Steve, now you're taking it a step further.
Absolutely. We want to build on our success last year. And so this year, our bill asks that and would require youth sports leagues to notify parents as to what the background check policies are. So they will let people know, yes, we have in fact done these background checks, here's how you can find out, make sure the coach is cleared, just to make sure that parents have the tools and the information necessary to make informed decisions.
Was there a case or circumstance that prompted this legislation?
Well, what's interesting is actually it was my own. I coach my daughter's soccer teams, and I remember being out there coaching, realizing that I hadn't undergone a background check, none of the other coaches had undergone a background check, and if that was true in our league, it was probably true in leagues throughout the state, and sure enough, we researched it and found out that that was true. And I think that's something for everybody who coaches. Anybody who's doing the coaching, they're doing it because they want to do right by their kids and be good parents. There's a segment of the population that does it so they can prey on children, and we want to make sure that that segment of the population doesn't have access to our young kids.
So the first bill gives them the ability to do federal and state background checks. The second bill requires them to notify parents what their policy is, but it doesn't mandate a check, does it?
That's correct. But what it does do is it makes sure that the parents, because they have to disclose what their policies are, it does let the parent know whether or not background checks have in fact been completed, and they can make decisions accordingly. They may not want to be in a league where the coaches don't have to undergo background checks. Right. But either way, they have the information in front of them. And by the way, the background check's free. So the Department of Justice will do it for free to make sure that it's not a cost burden to either the league or the individual who just wants to volunteer and be a coach.
All right. Well, Assemblyman, thank you very much for coming by, talking about these two pieces of legislation which are moving pretty well through the legislature. Thank you again.
My pleasure.
And thanks to our viewers for watching Local Edition on Time Warner Cable. A reminder, you can see this and other interviews on YouTube, also on My Government On Demand. Have a great day.